The Typewriter, the 12th of May, 2025. Moss cleaning the room. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن يزغ منهم عن أمرنا نذقه من عذاب السعير. Why would it be unusual to forsake desires? Why did you make that request? Are you afraid of me? Me? Afraid? Right. No, you would not be afraid. What do you do in the morning? Having a routine day is curious. Sometimes a routine can result in an obsessive behavior, causing the person not to succeed, but instead brings them down and causes failure. Some people would start their days drinking coffee. First, it becomes a habit because they enjoy it and would not choose out of their free will to give it up in the morning. Then it becomes a routine that they factor into their day schedule to start the day with a coffee. Then, for some people, it becomes a necessity due to their ignorance and lack of knowledge. They say that humans are creatures of habit. Some people define the habit in order to understand it and avoid it. Otherwise, their daily routine would be governed by their habits rather than them having a choice and a free will to do things they choose to do. A habit becomes a routine. Then, in severe cases, it becomes an obsession. Obsessions can also be defined with a tendency not to function properly without meeting certain circumstances and conditions. To base one's whole day on drinking coffee in the morning becomes obsessive when it is set as a condition to function properly. There is no difference between a habit and an obsession when it comes to definition, when put in contrast with being a creature of habit. Those who have a habit would be more likely to have an obsession. God created humans that way. There needs to be a decay at the end. Needs to, it's not a habit. It is most beautiful with a decay. Entering hell, standing in line, waiting for judgment to begin. The 16th of May, 2025. If it is a choice between either making God happy with you in this world or making God happy with you in the hereafter, which of the two options would you choose? My life might be conflicted between the two. Even the word might can make it possible to have other options present in the equation. Even fish do not swim only in two directions. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Proverbs 1:7. Humans need to be constrained to a limited number of options, otherwise it would be difficult to choose. Belief works as a factor, and desires work as another factor. Laws derived from belief tell humans how they should act in the world and by extension restrict them to following commandments based upon their beliefs. Belief is tied to choice. Even when a person decides not to believe, unless they are given clear evidence or unless they can sense and feel something tangible to prove the necessity of that belief, they are doing it using their free will. They do not desire to believe something because their desires defined the conditions for their own belief system rather than faith and knowledge. To believe something without evidence is not blind faith. It is pure faith that requires no evidence in itself. The truth does not need to prove itself to be true. It is true by necessity. This is why, when given a choice to believe something or the other, it goes back to whether the person decided preemptively to believe the truth or reject it. When a person decides preemptively to believe something, it is only done if God allowed that person to believe. All matters are done in accordance with what God wills to happen. No one can choose to become a believer unless God permits them to do so. The 2nd of June, 2025. Do you believe you deserve happiness? Seems to be a question which triggers many different dark outcomes if answered negatively. Do you believe you're worthy of unconditional love? Is another. Have you forgiven yourself for times you may have hurt others? Is another. Are you able to recognize when you are self-sabotaging? Is another. Do you believe you deserve a life filled with love, joy, and peace? Is another. Do you ever worry that deep down you're not as good a person as you want to be? Is another. Do you compare yourself to others and feel like you fall short? Is another. Do you feel you're living a life more focused on survival than fulfillment? Is another. Have you ever wished you could start over completely and become someone else? Is another. Do you ever feel like you're faking happiness to avoid burdening others? Is a question that would probably not be answered truthfully. Are you afraid of what might surface if you allowed yourself to be completely alone with your thoughts? Is an interesting question. It is irritating when someone claims to know something when they actually do not. Purgatory is a concept of purification of the soul before being allowed to reside in heaven. It is similar to the time of the punishment of the grave, where a person would be punished before Judgment Day. Limbo is said to be a realm where people who are not baptized would go, which includes infants and those who died without knowing Christ. In other words, they would be lost without embracing Christianity. But that is wrong. Limbo is not the place where these people would go to. Infants would go to heaven if they died before being baptized because they have committed no sin in their lives. God's people are there already. They already exist without regard to boundaries and borders. God's chosen people, and whom he calls as my people and my inheritance, and even Israel, are those who worship God alone and do not worship idols, do not worship money, do not worship women, do not worship power or politics or other human things. Those who worship God are God's people, and these already exist around the globe. When God turns towards them in favor, then he would be turning towards all the people who call upon his name, not a specific group of people. There is no reason to establish a city or a country and call it God's nation in order to act towards other nations with grandeur and pride. God's people are those who are humble in their dealings with others, not arrogant and prideful because of being given blessings from God, blinding them to the blessings that others also receive from God, but they choose to show gratitude to Him by hiding these blessings rather than boast about them. Like a typewriter, typing with a special white ink on white paper. Every event in your life is written on the paper, but not legible by you for a long time. Like a short-term memory, you can recall what was just written for a short amount of time, where the ink would be visible, but then after a while it becomes white. The only evidence you have of having had the thing written is the fact that the typewriter has skipped a bunch of lines already. Even if you were the one typing the events, you would have the evidence of having just done it yourself. You can't see the words on the paper unless a specific condition is met. If you think to what you did last week, it is all written down to the moment you went to sleep. If everything there is routine, the ink would be white, but if some parts of it were significant, then that acts as a visible ink so long as you give it enough value to remember it yourself. If you think to an event in the past and you do not remember something specific, then it suddenly comes back to you. That is when the white ink of that event changes to a visible ink. If you were looking at the paper at that time, you would notice the words reappearing for you to read them. If this is how memory works to some people, then it would be reassuring to know that the typewriter cannot go back or correct a past mistake. All it can do is provide a flow of new events that would provide more value to have them remembered and to choose to overlook the mistakes of the past. In essence, this is similar to asking forgiveness for a past mistake or a sin whose ink had smudged all over the papers that followed, making every paper of every day's events a reminder of the sin that was committed in the past. Unless you ask God for forgiveness of the sin, its ink would continuously stain the remainder of your life story, and it would be overwhelming to know that the effects of the sin itself would be the only thing visible on top of every paper. The typewriter's special ink works as a background documentation mechanism and a reminder of things you ought to feel regret for. Just as the paper goes in the typewriter one way blank and exits from the other end with writings on it, so is your life. You cannot change the past, and you do not know the future. Since the future is only the funneled words through the typewriter which had not yet been written but are in the process of being formulated. You can only live in the present. You can only live in the moment the buttons are pressed, and there is no going back.